Charles Oliveira, after his bright comeback, challenged Conor McGregor. If their rematch doesn't take place with Islam Makhachev in October at the UFC 294 tournament. Hello fighters. This is the world of MMA. In today's video I will give a prediction on a potential fight between Charles Oliveira and Conor McGregor. Here we go. Charles Oliveira recently defeated a difficult and top contender Beneil Dariush at UFC 289, who was on an 8th straight win streak. Many believe that Beneil was the one to beat Oliveira and fight Islam Makhachev for the title. However, Charles won by TKO in the first round and shut up many experts who thought he would lose. After the fight, in his interview, Oliveira said that he would like to fight Islam for the second time and added that if UFC would give a chance to the winner of Dustin Poirier vs Justin Gaethje fight, then he would like to earn extra money on the fight with Conor McGregor to save his time. The Irishman probably won't be back this year and probably won't fight Chandler since he didn't pass his doping test. So Oliveira could very well face McGregor in the first half of next year. Then let's not take too long and give a brief overview of the fighters and my prediction for this fight. Let's go. Charles Oliveira holds the organization record for the most bonuses per performance of the night with 12, the most wins by receptions with 16, and the most early wins with 20. Before the loss to Islam Makhachev, he was on a streak of 11 wins, 10 of which were early victories. As it often happens with the Brazilians, he comes from jiu-jitsu, although it is not difficult to guess about it from his records, which we have already mentioned. Oliveira started his MMA career at the age of 18, and by 20, after getting the 12-0 record, he was invited by the UFC. Charles got off to a strong start, 2 early wins with bonuses. And the extra award was a fight against Jim Miller. Now he is a veteran, but then he was going to the UFC with 7-1 record and his only loss was to Sirius Gray Maynard, and that by decision. The young Brazilian did not pass such a test, losing in the first round. Oliveira then lost to Cerrone and moved up to featherweight division. There he repeated his debut history, 2 wins, then a loss to Swanson. The Brazilian was written off by many, but after losing also to Edgar, he came up with 4 wins and lost again. In his fight against the rising Max Holloway, Charles got injured and thought he would be crippled. But it wasn't just losses that worried the organization's bosses. In the featherweight division, Oliveira regularly failed to weigh in. In April 2017, he was forced to return to a higher category. Traditionally, he started with a win, but then lost to Felder. After bouncing back, the Brazilian began to fight lesser-known opponents and, with 6 wins, topped the tournament for the first time, as it turned out later the last before a long pause due to the coronavirus pandemic. By smothering Kevin Lee, Oliveira ended up on the 7th line and has a chance to break into the top division if he wins. His opponent was Tony Ferguson, who lost to Gaethje and broke his 12-win streak. The Brazilian easily defeated the veteran and earned the right to challenge the vacant UFC lightweight title left by Khabib Nurmagomedov. In the first round, the American had a chance to win, but in the second round, Charles knocked out his opponent, and 28 fights later became the champion of the elite promotion. Many people, looking at the list of opponents and the level of Dustin Poirier, thought that Oliveira would lose the belt in his first defense. But it took little more than 2 rounds for the Brazilian to finish the American and win another bonus. And then there was the fight in May 2022, when the Brazilian botched the weigh-in, but finished Justin Gaethje in 3.5 minutes. Then last October he lost to Islam Makhachev by second-round choke. 8 months later, however, he returned to the octagon and defeated Beneil Dariush by TKO in the first round. Conor McGregor has long been a household name, but his career before the UFC didn't start out so smoothly. By April 2013, McGregor had 12 wins, 2 early losses by submission and virtually no money. Even despite his dual champion status with the British promotion Cage Warriors, Conor told that his future wife Dee Devlin was supporting him. So one day Dana White came to the University of Dublin and every resident of the capital told him about McGregor. Later in an interview, the head of the UFC would say, "After the first meeting with Conor, I called Lorenzo and told him that if this guy could at least throw punches, he would be a huge superstar. All because Notorious has taken promotion fights and triceps to a new, kind of off-the-charts level. Coming into the UFC, the Irishman wasted just over a minute in his first fight, brightly finishing Brimage and earning the knockout bonus of the evening. Then McGregor won young Max Holloway, but for the first time his fight came down to a decision, and also Conor injured his knee and had to go to surgery. Nearly a year out of the octagon, and a return to his native Dublin. Diego Brandao was no match for Conor, and already in the first round he was knocked out by the Irishman. And the next opponent was Dustin Poirier. Conor blossomed. The fight against the American can be considered as the beginning of the McGregor era. He was destroying at all the press conferences of the Diamond, and every time he said that he would defeat him in the first round. When the fighters entered the octagon, it was immediately clear that the knockout was a matter of time. It took less than 2 minutes for the Irishman to catch Dustin making a mistake and finish. Conor began his title run for the featherweight belt that Aldo owned. In the next fight, McGregor ran over German Dennis Siver, jumped right out of the octagon, and began defiantly challenging Jose to a fight. In early 2015, the UFC announced the Aldo McGregor fight, and a long history of hate-filled confrontation began, with a quick finale. What the Irishman did on the eve of the fight with Poirier turned out to be a flower, because Aldo got many times more. Conor was tearing up his photos in public, throwing darts, snatching the champion's belt from the Brazilian, and pummeling Jose in every way possible. And when Aldo got injured and a fight for the interim title was scheduled against Chad Mendes, McGregor switched to the American, but didn't forget about the champion. Once again predicting developments, McGregor defeated Mendes by knockout at the end of the second round. Now it was just a matter of waiting for Jose to recover and Conor could fight for the full title. UFC 194, according to various sources, repeated the all-time mixed martial arts record for sold-out broadcasts, which belonged to the 100th anniversary tournament of the organization with Brock Lesnar in the title fight. Looking ahead, McGregor will break that record, and not once. And the fight against Jose? On that December morning, the entire Instagram was awash with him. At that time, that social network had a 15-second limit on video clips. McGregor had just 13 seconds for an angry Aldo to make a mistake, and one accurate left punch was enough to end the Brazilian's crazy 10-year unbeaten streak. But that wasn't enough for the Irishman. He wanted to be the first UFC 2 title holder at the same time. That's how their feud with Khabib Nurmagomedov began, which practically turned into a war. But at first, the fight for the lightweight belt was disrupted due to injury to then-champion Rafael dos Anjos. Nate Diaz came on as a substitute, who was not affected by mind games from McGregor. At the end of the second round, Nate choked Conor and uttered the legendary phrase, "I'm not surprised." The Irishman's ambition was hurt, and he postponed winning the second belt, deciding to get even with Diaz first. The rematch was a great one, 25 minutes of real fistfighting and victory for Notorious, by a very controversial majority decision. While Conor was getting even with Nate, the lightweight belt changed hands. Eddie Alvarez, after defeating Dos Anjos, became the champion and had to make his first defense against Nurmagomedov. But Dana White had other plans. Alvarez and McGregor topped the historic tournament in New York, and Eagle got Michael Johnson as his opponent at the same tournament. Nurmagomedov dominated most of the fight and was talking to White in parallel, demanding a fight against the Irishman. Eddie, like his previous opponents with the exception of Diaz, was handled by McGregor before the fight. Alvarez was restrained and knocked out several times in the octagon, and it was over midway through the second round. Conor became the first double champion in UFC history. Khabib waited another 2 years to meet with the Irishman. During this time he managed to destroy Barboza and win the vacant title against Al Iaquinta. McGregor in that time went into boxing, had a fight against the greatest Floyd Mayweather, and made so much money that many didn't believe in his return. But a feud with Nurmagomedov did bring the Irishman back into the octagon. Their fight again broke the record of pay-per-view, but what happened in the octagon, you know very well. In case you missed it, Khabib ran over Conor. And after that he had a mass fight, and then it became clear that the Irishman's thrashing had gone too far, and many people just don't understand it. Once again, after taking a break for over a year, McGregor came back in January 2020 and decimated the veteran Cerrone. But more importantly, Conor never once spoke badly of Donald and showed him respect in every way. Conor then had a rematch and a trilogy with his longtime rival Dustin Poirier, where he lost both of his fights by knockout. But the worst thing happened in the third fight, where the Irishman broke his leg. In terms of striking technique, Conor McGregor will be the favorite. He's one of the best punchers in UFC history. He has beaten many of the top punchers in his time. In terms of wrestling and grappling, Charles Oliveira is going to be a favorite. He has 16 wins by submission in the UFC to his credit. That's just crazy. He beat Gaethje and Poirier with the BJJ. In terms of stamina, I think Oliveira will be better here as well, who is breathing well in the late rounds. I think Charles Oliveira will win this fight by submission. He's going to let McGregor work the first few rounds. But when the Irishman gets tired, Charles will start his game, and in the second or third round he will submit Conor. What do you think, friends? Write your opinions in the comments. Bye all.